Sometimes the Pacific War is thought of as a war fought only on atolls, on small islands, but maybe in some small archipelagos. Yes, true. The deeds of the Old Breed, the 1st Division of the Marines and other American units, but also English and Australian, have become legendary during the Pacific War. Some of these were told years ago by a beautiful home box office series called The Pacific. It focuses on some historical figures, including that of Sergeant and Machine Gunner John Basilone. But today we're not exactly talking about the Old Breed and the Marines. Today we're talking about the other Pacific War, a war fought at sea. Because sometimes it is thought that the Navy is only there to transport soldiers around the world to then fight on land. It's not exactly like that. Since the times of Gaius Duilius, legendary admiral of the Republican Rome, at sea we fight and we really fight. We fight hard. Today I'm going to tell you about a particular episode of this war at sea, a war that is sometimes forgotten, at least by some of us Westerners who are not well acquainted with the dynamics of the Pacific War. It's an episode, one of the last episodes of the clash of what were supposed to be the Queens of the Seas. And yet, for many reasons, they were solitary ships, often destined to stay still in ports or to play a secondary role. The episode I'm telling you about today has gone down in history as the Night of the Battleships. 1942, second half of 42. In the Pacific, they've been fighting for almost a year now, ever since the Japanese Empire decided to challenge the British Empire, the United States, Australia, and the Dutch dominions. To expand their imperialistic sphere of influence at the Asian level and beyond, they are fighting hard and bitterly. The first months of the war, those from the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, to the Battle of Midway at the beginning of the summer of 42, see the Japanese essentially prevailing over the English, Americans, Dutch, Australians. They struggle a lot to contain the increasingly overbearing, increasingly preponderant push of the Japanese, who obviously count on an initial advantage in numerical terms and also in combat experience. At Guadalcanal, this small island of the Solomon Islands archipelago, the fighting begins. It was in the summer of 1942 when the first Anglo-American forces arrived to try to drive out those Japanese who had arrived shortly before on the island and had decided to make it an advanced base. Why? The position of Guadalcanal is very particular in the chessboard of the South Pacific. It's like an advanced point that looks on one side to the eastern coast of Australia, in addition to New Guinea. And on the other side, it allows you to look even further east, towards Noumea, the islands at the time under French control, towards New Zealand. And so all of this represents a very present and very risky danger for the Allies. Allies who intervene in force precisely to guard the channel, bringing men, resources, materials, armaments. But it's not enough. It's not enough because bringing all this also means providing a cover, an air cover, and a naval cover. The air cover arrives thanks to what will be called the Cactus Force Moors. That is a support air force that will be based at Anderson Field. Anderson Airport, named in honor of Navy Major Lofton Anderson, killed during the Battle of Midway from Anderson Field. American planes can beat the Solomon area up to Rabaul and intercept part of the Japanese traffic. For this reason, the Japanese must review their strategy. They can no longer rely on slow merchant ships that become easy prey for American aviation. What will be called the Tokyo Express is invented. That is the method of loading troops and supplies on fast hunters, destroyers, and light cruisers to be sent right to Guadalcanal. Because at Guadalcanal, the fate of Australia is at stake. If the Japanese win, Australia would be threatened. It could even be invaded at the amphibious level. If the African Americans win, the front would turn upside down. You understand well by yourselves. That's why Guadalcanal has a very high strategic importance at Guadalcanal. They fight hard, heavy, in the jungle of the swamps, on the beaches. It's a brutal fight, hand to hand, but there's also a fight at sea. You see it in the summer of 42, a summer in which initially America, its allies, struggle a lot. Between August 8th and 9th, 1942, after having landed the Marines and left a small garrison force, the United States Navy and the Australian Navy suffer one of the worst defeats in what will become known as the Battle of Savo Island. During that battle, the Allied navies suffer a heavy blow. 4 cruisers are destroyed, sunk, in addition to many others being damaged, and over 1,000 deaths at sea will be mourned. It's the beginning of what the Allies themselves, especially the Americans with a bit of a dark but British noise, will call Iron Bottom Sound. The Iron Bottom Strait between the island of Guadalcanal and the islet of Savo. There will be many sinkings of merchant ships, transports, troops, but especially warships, as if to carpet the steel bottom with the wrecks that sank one after the other, some breaking apart, others in sections, others exploding, others simply sinking by the bow or stern or capsizing. In so many ways, those ships sink. On August 8th to 9th, as mentioned, the first battle takes place, and it's a disaster. Then Admiral Nimitz orders Admiral Olsey to more decisively guard the area, to prevent above all the Japanese from flowing reinforcements that could be decisive in the ground battle. On the other hand, the Japanese are not sitting on their hands. In fact, they fully intend to recover Guadalcanal to complete the track that was taken by the Americans and entrenched by a fortified field, and to continue their offensive. That's why we come to 2 close encounters, clashes that see 2 very heterogeneous fleets facing each other. The first, the Japanese one, is essentially based on 2 fast battleships. They have the peculiarity of being of the same class. She and the Kirishima are part of the Kongo class. Designed in Great Britain and then rebuilt in Japan. Initially, they were battle cruisers. They were rebuilt between the 20s and 30s as fast battleships, ideal for escorting aircraft carrier teams. They are the Yale and the Kirishima, 2 of the ships that participated, albeit indirectly, in the attack on Pearl Harbor. I don't know if you remember, but after Pearl Harbor, the Americans, especially the sailors, the members of the United States Navy, had made a vow. They would not have ended the war before sinking. All the ships that had participated in the Day of Infamy in the surprise attack on the naval base in Hawaii, Yale, and Kirishima are entrusted to 2 officers, very capable. One is the head of the 2nd Japanese fleet, Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo. Under him is Vice Admiral Hiroaki Abe. Abe is entrusted with a crucial task to go with his battle team and the relative escort in front of Guadalcanal, and to bombard Henderson Field with shrapnel bullets, the fragmenting ones, in order to render the runway unusable. Meanwhile, another team, under the command of Rear Admiral Reizo Tanaka, will escort the transports, troops destined to reinforce the Japanese garrison and also to bring weapons, food, and ammunition. On the other hand, there is the American Navy, United States Navy, that is fragmented into task forces specifically to try to control as much territory as possible. The task of controlling the area, of watching the channel, is entrusted to Task Force Group 67-4 of Rear Admiral Daniel Callahan. Callahan has been informed of the arrival of the Japanese fleet. He must intercept the transports in any way. Callahan is unaware of the presence of the bombardment force, but what's worse is that he doesn't know exactly the sea disposition of the Japanese fleet. Callahan simply sets out to intercept the transports. Well, that interception force is first spotted by the Japanese. At dawn on November 11, 1942, Japanese dive bombers launched from the Junyo, north of Guadalcanal, attacked the American fleet. A fleet that is not Callan's, but that of other transports, the American ones. Because it's clear that even the Americans can't do without supplies of drinking water, of ammunition. It's the signal that intervention is needed. Callan is given the order to proceed at full speed through the strait. The Iron Bottom Sound, which separates the small island of Savo from the larger island of Guadalcanal, to intercept the enemy force. He knows that there is also, in fact, an aircraft carrier, even better if it can be sunk. When Callan arrives at the Iron Bottom Sound, he makes a mistake. In fact, he's not alone. There's also his subordinate, Rear Admiral Norman Scott, who is on a reconnaissance mission aboard the light cruiser United States ship Atlanta. Scott sets off with the Atlanta and its fighters at the head of the formation. The guide should act as a scout, and Scott, who is leading the entire American fleet, doesn't realize he's in the middle of the Japanese bombing formation. It takes a while to understand what's happening, especially because it's the middle of the night. Imagine the Solomon Sea without light, pitch black, rippled. It's not exactly smooth as oil. In the darkness, something happens because the Japanese realize that the enemy is passing through their ships. Suddenly the spotlights turn on. The spotlights of the battleships. The spotlights of the Japanese cruisers illuminate one after the other the ships of Scott that are bombarded mercilessly. The Japanese gunners still have them on board in the towers. The shrapnel bullets didn't even have time to change them with the perforated ones. Sure, the perforated one would be better for attacking other ships, but the shrapnel still does a lot of damage. Callahan, from behind, sees the scene and decides to intervene as well. He orders all his ships to swing their pieces and fire. I can't shoot anymore. We need to confront the enemy and prevent him from accomplishing his mission. In the ensuing scuffle, if they have to, of all colors, a sailor. A little later, he will say it's like a bar fight, but a particular fight. It starts when someone turns off the lights and everyone present starts to give each other a good beating. You can't understand who you're beating and why. The Americans themselves realize it. Callan's flagship brandishes the pieces and inadvertently fires the United States ship San Francisco against Atlanta, which is identified as a Japanese ship. In the bombing of Atlanta, Scott and all his staff on the bridge die. They are hit full on by the broadsides of a friendly ship. Things don't go any better for Callahan, who is targeted by the large Japanese caliber that devastate the United States ship San Francisco and kill him and his officers. Without a guide, the San Francisco breaks away, leaves formation. The other ships quickly become easy prey for the larger Japanese ships, which begin to mercilessly bombard them and sink one after the other. Almost no one is saved. Even in this case, it's a bad defeat for the Americans, but they've landed a pretty good blow. Yes, because in that chaos, in that truly incredible chaos in the dark with the spotlights illuminating, first one ship, then another, then a formation, then the opposing formation, and you can't even figure out who is attacking whom. An American fighter got very close to the Yai, one of the two major Japanese ships, and, being of a lower profile, was able to attack the Yai and to bomb it with cannons, even with machine guns, wounding Admiral Abe, killing his chief of staff and hitting it on the dead work, opening breaches. The Yai is seriously damaged. Abe is injured. He panics. Instead of finishing and delivering the coup de grace to the American fleet, which is reduced to a flicker, he orders to reverse the rudder, to go back, to head north, to reorganize and then return. For this reason, Abe is harshly criticized not so much by his superior Kondo, but by Isoroku Yamamoto. He, the commander-in-chief of the Japanese Navy, the man who is a legend. How did Abe get permission to go back? Despite having a clear superiority at sea and not destroying the American fleet, he would have struck a blow, perhaps fatal indirectly, to the American garrison on Guadalcanal. For this reason, Abe is transferred to land and in his place goes to sea, Kondo, who does not take direct command of the Kirishima. The IA along the way was sunk, and the same Japanese. Irreplaceable, too wounded, the old ship is sunk by its masters on the way back. The Kirishima remains, which is still a good ship, has been well rebuilt and is run by experienced men. On the other hand, the Americans can't wait to take a great revenge. And just over 24 hours have passed. On November 13, the new operation of the Japanese Imperial Navy sets sail. It's time to return to Guadalcanal and finish the job, this time really attacking Henderson Field, and above all, escorting the last transports, those vital for the Japanese. On the opposing front, the Americans intend to avenge the death of two admirals, Never before in contemporary times had such a tragedy been seen for the Americans, and above all to destroy the Japanese attack force. It's a showdown. It's time to bring everything to the table that one can muster. That's why Olsey assigns Rear Admiral Willis Lee to take command of Task Force 64, composed of 2 state-of-the-art battleships, the United States ship South Dakota and the United States ship Washington. There would also be the Enterprise, but the aircraft carrier is the only one left in the Solomons War Theater, and on top of that, it has suffered an electrical failure in one of the elevators. For this reason, it is kept in reserve. They don't want to take any risks. At sea, Willis will have the big guns of his battleships and some snow hunters as escorts. On the other hand, Kondo is betting on Kirishima. On his flagship, a heavy cruiser, the Tago, and another heavy cruiser, the Takao, plus other light ships. The clash must be total, and it will be one of the very few clashes, and in the chronology, the penultimate one. Among large battleships, during the Second World War, there were other battleship encounters, but not many. We can essentially trace them back to Punta Stilo. Summer of 1940, brief exchange of cannon fire between Regia, Marina, and Mediterranea. The English fleet hunting the Bismarck with the Battle of the Denmark Strait, when the Bismarck targets the hood and sinks it, then inflicts heavy blows on the modern Prince of Wales as well. And later, on St. Stephen's Day in 1943, there will be the last great battle between surface ships, when the Her Majesty's ship, Duke of York, will sink the Shard House. So the second naval battle of Guadalcanal, will become one of the last and rare clashes between battleships. On the evening of November 14th, the two forces confront each other. On the radar, Willis sees the Japanese formation. He prepares to attack it. On the other hand, Kondo has the same determination. But there are problems on both sides because nothing at sea goes as one would like or as planned. This time, there is no maneuvering error. This time, the American fleet does not end up in the middle of the Japanese one, but it is a Japanese fighter sent on a reconnaissance mission that ends up under the fire of the American heavy guns. The Yanami, that's its name, is almost the sacrificial victim. It's ahead of the entire formation. Because the Japanese don't have radar and still have to rely on lookouts, the Yanami ends up under American fire, but manages to shoot, launch torpedoes, and most importantly, inform Kondo of the situation. At that point, even though he knows there are 2 American battleships, or at least that's what he's told, he doesn't back down in attacks. He orders the gunners to target the ships, but they only see one, the United States ship South Dakota, which in the meantime has had an electrical failure that has essentially immobilized it. The South Dakota is a modern, well-equipped ship with main guns of 406 millimeters, but it's immobile, it can't defend itself, it can't do anything. Fortunately, it's a well-built ship, and it takes the hits from the Japanese without too many consequences. Unintentionally, Willis has a great opportunity. For the Japanese, the Washington is as if it had disappeared into the night. They can't see it. And it's precisely a Washington that, taking advantage of the fact that the Japanese are hitting the other battleship, moves to an optimal distance, brandishes its towers and fires. Fires more, I can't. Fires on the entire Japanese fleet. Vomits on the Japanese. Those 406 mm bullets that are huge. If you saw one of the bullet launch chambers inside the towers of the last remaining battleships, the ones that have become the museum ship, well, could you really understand how big a 406 mm bullet is and how heavy and how disruptive it is? Here the bullets start raining down on the Imperial ships, one after the other. And it's then that Kondo realizes he underestimated the enemy. He understood that the second American battleship had not disappeared. It hadn't gone away. It had just moved out of trajectory. But it's too late. The Washington fires, and hits. It hits Davide, Japan, and especially hits the Kirishima, which starts to feel the blows, incredibly directing the shot. More than the radar of Washington, it's that of South Dakota, which is meanwhile regaining energy. And after a while, it gets back on its feet, manages to move again. Kondo, however, knows that he can't do anything else. His is almost a suicide mission. He must not only attack the Americans, but also keep them engaged so that the last transports, 4 ships previously sailed from the Japanese bases, are not found by the American front, or even worse, by the American aviation. He must keep the Americans engaged to the point of exhaustion, and the peak of the Japanese effort ends just after 3 in the morning. Leonami is now a smoking wreck. It is abandoned. The Kirishima has taken so many hits it can no longer stay afloat. All the survivors on board are transferred to another torpedo boat, and then the last charges are detonated. The Kirishima, which can no longer even stay on the waterline, is gradually listing, sinking, losing its stern, losing its bow. The heavy pagoda-shaped superstructures, a result of the reconstruction in the 30s, cause it to capsize. It ends up sinking not far from Savo Island. Mission accomplished for the Americans, especially since at the first light of November 15, the Cactus Force identifies the last 4 Japanese transports. They have practically arrived at Tassafaronga Bay. They have just started to unload their cargo. When the bombers arrive that target them one by one, they set them on fire. They destroy them. And it's not just the ships that go up in smoke, it's especially their contents, weapons, ammunition, provisions. The Japanese, those who remain to watch the channel, are forced to resist for another couple of months, even without food. Those who survive the battle will be taken prisoner, reduced to human skeletons. They had nothing left to feed on but blind faith in their emperor and the will to fight. The Battle of Guadalcanal ends at the beginning of 1943. The Marines will find the remains of those 4 transports at Faronga Tax, blackened, charred, gutted by bombs. These are the last remnants of what was the battle, along with the bunkers, the tanks that went up in flames, everything that represented one of the most crucial and brutal battles of the Second World War. And that iron bottom sound, well, it's still there. The wrecks are all there. It's become a diver's paradise. Starting from the 80s, several researchers have made more dives in the area in search of the wrecks. And one after the other, they have cataloged them. They are underwater cemeteries. The cemetery of the United States ship Quincy, of Versailles, of the Australian Canberra, of the Atlanta, of the Kirishima. They represent the death at sea of many fighters on opposite sides, in some cases victims of mistakes, in others victims of acts of heroism. What else to say? If you like diving, if you like learning history through the submerged, take a trip to Guadalcanal. Immerse me in those beautiful crystal clear waters. You will find, well, I've already told you the iron bottom sound, the strait with the iron bottom. But when will you see those wrecks? Besides being fascinated by what nature has managed to reclaim from the iron, also think about those boys who found themselves fighting in the darkness, not knowing what they had in front of them and whether they would survive or not. It's the sadness and the
hardness of
every conflict that denies the nature of human brotherhood and instead reaffirms its darkest side, the self-destructive one, the one of hatred, the one that ultimately makes us much, much less human.